Welcome to Around the Campfire. Thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode on a very important topic, which is web accessibility. I'm Jaimie Somlai, Marketing Director at Northwoods, and I'm very happy to be joined today by Sydney Shimko, our Web Accessibility Practice Lead and Front-End Developer Extraordinaire. If you've watched previous episodes, you know that we always start off with a bit of personal trivia or something unique about our guests. Our team is so diverse and has so many fascinating aspects of their lives outside of work that it's a really fun aspect to highlight. So we always start out that way. So Sydney happens to be not only a front-end developer and accessibility expert, but in her spare time, when she has it, she's an avid mountain biker and a road cyclist and co-head coach of the Shorewood mountain bike team. And for those of you who aren't from Milwaukee, or the Milwaukee area, Shorewood is a suburb just north of Milwaukee, and it happens to be Northwood's headquarters. So I guess I will start out by just asking you, Sydney, what's kind of new on the road cycling circuit? Have you had kind of an interesting, challenging ride recently or anything unique happen?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jaimie, because I love to talk about mountain biking and our mountain bike team. So I showed up here, just fully in the campfire vibe, because this time of year, this is what we call our festival season. Our Shorewood mountain bike team is part of the Wisconsin Interscholastic Cycling League. There's over 90 teams around the state, and we come together for a series of events this time of year that include camping and mountain biking. Of other fun activities for the kids. This is sixth grade all the way through the end of high school. And it's so much fun. Sometimes we even have s'mores.
I love it.
So that's what my life is all about right now when I'm not at work. And it's really awesome. Actually fun to be able to show up here and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's so great. No, that's such it's so fun to talk to you because it's always nice to hear about that aspect of your life too, outside of just all of the work that you're doing here at Northwoods. So, and speaking of s'mores, that is also a standing question that I ask every guest at the beginning of each of our episodes because s'mores is our signature snack here at Northwoods. The question is about what chocolate you like in your s'mores, because what I have found in asking everybody this question is nobody answers it the same way, which is fascinating to me. So that's my question for you before we dig into web accessibility.
Well, I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to take it one further. I'm a dark chocolate person all the time.
Okay.
So I'm not going to stick to a brand here, but definitely dark chocolate. But I will say this, the best s'more I ever had was when we didn't have graham crackers and we substituted chocolate chip cookies.
Ooh.
And put them on the grill, like over the campfire.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Got them warm and then did the whole s'more thing, and it was incredible. So signature dish right there.
Signature dish for sure. That's like a skillet dish almost you need to kind of keep everything together. That's awesome. All right. I get all sorts of great ideas from you guys, and now I have to try all of these different versions of s'mores myself so I can experience them all. So well, awesome. Thank you for that. So we'll go ahead and dive into the real reason that we're here today, which is to talk about web accessibility. So I guess the first thing that I'd like to do is just kind of make sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of understanding what web accessibility is and why it is so important for marketers, particularly, and the businesses that they work for to focus on, especially right now, because this topic has been around for a while. It's not new, but what about web accessibility is so critical for businesses to know about today?
Sure. So when we talk about web accessibility, what we mean is really ensuring that the content and interactions that are on your web pages are accessible to everyone, to all users, right? What's great about web accessibility is that typically anything we might do toward that end is going to be good for all users, right? So that's a huge benefit. So we want the web pages to be accessible to anyone, regardless of how someone might access the internet. So of course, that includes all users on all device types that we might commonly think of, right? So just a mobile phone or a desktop, but also including a variety of connections, how you might connect to the internet, what speed you might connect to the internet, and then taking that a step further from what we might think of, we're also including someone who might be on assistive technology like a screen reader or with a different type of input device. Most importantly, a device other than a mouse, somebody who's maybe just using the keyboard, or somebody who may have a joystick or some other way of interacting with the website. And then when we discuss who to include, considerations for testing for full accessibility, it's useful to think about with sometimes the things we sometimes don't think about might be somebody who has a temporary situation, like a broken arm, or they're holding a baby, right? That's sort of a common thing that people bring up as a way that someone might have a limited mobility because they're using their arm for something else, right? But then importantly, also users who might need support as their vision or their mobility is declining with age. That's a big population that we want to be thinking about. And then lots of people who approach the web with different abilities in all aspects: physical, cognitive, auditory, something related to memory, and more, right? And it's important to remember that this is not a small group of outlying folks. This is, up to 25% of all users, which means it's someone it might very well be yourself, right? And so just it's that important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a great explanation.
Oh, and actually you asked, why is it so important right now? And so I just wanted to add too, web accessibility is super important right now because the European Accessibility Act, the enforcement measures of that act are going to effect in June of next year. So the act, which came in 2019, it allowed this 5-year period for organizations to come into compliance. And now that grace period is up. And so in 2025, those enforcement measures will come into place.
Okay. Yeah, that's really great for companies to know. And that applies to not just companies who are based in EU countries, but those that are actually doing business in those EU companies, right? But they might be based in the United States. Is that
That's
correct?
right.
Okay.
That's right. Anybody doing business in the EU. And important to know, unlike previous legislations, the EAA specifically targets private sector entities. So it's placing that legal obligation on companies to make their offerings accessible. And this extends to websites, mobile apps, e-commerce platforms, and more.
Okay. Yeah, that's very good for companies to keep in mind, especially multinational ones. So I'm guessing that this is a question that you get often from marketers and clients that you work with, but it's how do you even know that your website or your digital application has accessibility issues? Are they generally pretty obvious, or when is it appropriate for a company to hire an accessibility expert such as yourself, such as Northwoods, to come in and help them understand what is not accessible in their digital properties?
Sure. Well, the unfortunate easy answer to the first question of is my website accessible? It's probably no. And I can say that again, unfortunately, because most of the web is not doing very well in this regard. Although I will say that engagement and understanding and this sort of awareness has improved in the last few years, but we're just not there yet. And so there's a lot to be done, but there's a lot, there has a lot that has been done. So some, along the lines of how can I tell if my website is accessible, there are some issues that are very obvious. For example, all sighted users are going to sort of instantly recognize if there's a color contrast issue, if the gray text is so light against a white background that you just almost can't read it, right? Similarly, interactive states, so hover states and focus states, if I'm a sighted user, it's using a mouse and I hover over something, if I don't see a visible change, to me, that's an obvious thing. So some of those, can be easily tested just by looking at a web page and interacting with it quickly. Other accessibility issues can only be found when you interact with the site in a certain way. So I kind of mentioned earlier, different inputs or somebody who's not using a mouse. So it's very common for users to interact with a keyboard, only a keyboard. It's also very common for web developers to not think about that and make all these mouse interactions. And so that's one that again, if you are interacting with a mouse, you're not going to notice, but it's also right there for keyboard users. Similarly is descriptive link text. And so that's going to be especially important for somebody who's using a screen reader and having that text read to them. A very common pattern historically, but unfortunately still today is link text like click here, right? If I am a screen reader user navigating the website link by link, and there's links all over the site that say click here, that doesn't give me any indication of where that's going or what's going to happen when I do. Similarly, it's learn more. So we'll often get a website where if you click link by, or sorry, if you were navigating link by link, the screen reader is going to say, learn more, learn more, learn more.
But you don't know what you're learning more about.
Anything. Exactly. What are you learning more about? So that's why we talk about using, well, descriptive link text, obviously, but using sort of an action to describe where it is that I'm going and what's going to happen next. And just, link the word. So for example, someone might have said, click here to learn more about X. Well, instead of all those initial words being linked up, just say X.
Yes,
wherever that is that you're about to learn more about, right?
Right.
Yeah. And page titles is a similar thing, right? Like we want to have page titles on a site, but they also have to mean something. They have to be descriptive of the content that's gonna with them. And then
that's good to know.
As far as, is there a way to sort of do a quick test to know if my website is accessible? There's, this sort of gets to the question of, do I need to hire an expert to know if my website is accessible? The quick test that anybody can do, there's both automated and manual testing. There's, free testing tools. We have blog posts on our website, pointing out some free testing tools. And these are going to give you a really high level view of the state of accessibility for your site. It's sort of like, am I not, right? Rather than really digging into all the details. And with those tests, some common errors can be found really quickly. However, with that said, experts, they always have the understanding and the experience of years in the field that you may not have, right? So they can find issues and offer solutions to fix those that are faster. They're going to find them more efficiently. And then, of course, they also know what to look for. They know how to look for more nuanced concerns and sort of get ahead of problems that they can expect before they arise.
Yeah, perfect. So that leads me into my next question, which is, if marketers understand the importance and the value of accessibility, one of the reasons they may be pushing it down the priority list is because it is somewhat complicated to kind of identify, remediate, and they can feel kind of overwhelmed maybe by the amount of work that needs to be done from a remediation standpoint. And also there's sometimes budget implications to that, and marketers may not have budget, set aside to deal with it. But so what are some of the ways that, you encourage clients in helping them understand that the process doesn't have to be so intimidating, and how you kind of help them approach it in a way that makes it more digestible?
Sure. Yeah, so you're right. Identifying, accessibility issues and remediating them, it can definitely feel overwhelming, and it can be expensive depending on what you have to start with. So, and part of that is sort of historic in the way we've approached it, and I'll talk in a minute about how we're trying to approach it a little bit differently. The historic approach has been the full site audit, go through everything and tell me everything that's wrong and have this comprehensive view. And that makes sense. It can make sense for a lot of reasons. One is this gives you the whole, the full scope of the concern, right? You can look at the whole at once, right? It lists all the issues in one place. It allows you to prioritize what you're going to fix first, for example. But historically, one of the reasons they've come about is just sort of the structure of one party having a website another party auditing that site, right? So they're going to give you the full picture. They're going to come in and, just be really comprehensive. And this is an easy way for a third party to assess what you've got. And even if potentially they're not going to help with the remediation and they're just going to offer these, list of issues. So as you might imagine, when someone is coming in and auditing everything, the report and the sort of deliverables they're going to come back with, they're going to be complex. They're going to be difficult to navigate, especially in a situation like web pages where there's lots of pages, there's lots of issues. How do I want to look at this data? I might want to look at it by what are all the issues on this page, or I might want to look at it as what are all the pages with this issue, and other ways of sort of inverting and manipulating that data. So while that's, anything that's sort of that complex is difficult then to sort of streamline and get it into a digestible view.
Sure.
So there's pros and cons there, right? What we've been trying to do lately really is employ what I'm calling this find one, fix one sort of a method, right? Because we know what are the most common errors, what are the easiest to remedy, what's going to be most impactful to actually help the user and improve that accessibility, we can start there. So we can test for common errors and set a path to fixing them right away. We know we're going to find them. We know they're quick to fix. And then we can dig a little deeper into the next round. And so with this technique, what we're doing is, we're trying to help clients make the significant impact immediately, and then follow over time a path towards sort of full compliance. So I prefer this, again, as opposed to find everything that's wrong, be overwhelmed by the results,
right?
Make a big,
put it under your pillow and forget that it even exists. Yeah.
Right. And you've got a 5-year plan and,
Right.
maybe you start walking the path, but it's this massive endeavor and takes a long time. Instead, we can just start making impactful change immediately based on what we know from experience to be some, impactful. That means easier to fix. Maybe it's at a global issue and a big impact because it's across all the pages and it's not that hard to fix and not that hard to find. And so really reaching out and trying to make change right away.
Yeah, that iterative approach is, I think, a lot easier for people to, just decreases the stress involved in the amount of work. That's a really, really great way to approach it. I mean, one of the questions that we hear from clients and prospects every now and then too is just having an accessibility policy on my website enough to keep me out of trouble? If I do not remedy anything on my site, but I have an accessibility policy there, is that enough to kind of, keep me legally okay?
Right. Well, I think you know the answer. Of course not, right? And now, should you have one? Absolutely. I mean, is it a really quick thing that you can do that is impactful? Yes. Is it enough? No, but let's talk about what it is. Small things like that it demonstrates that you're trying. It demonstrates that you care. I hope that means that you're not just taking that step, but the next one as well, right? But wrapped into that are things like offering an accessible way to give feedback or to reach out and say, hey, I am struggling with your website. Can I get someone to help me, right? And so the idea that there is a path forward. The website, an issue on the website isn't full stop inability to reach your company for services or products or whatever. There's another way. Just being able to move forward is tremendously helpful for anybody, as opposed to just feeling that dead stop. So
absolutely.
Small steps are great. It's not enough, but they're great.
They're better than nothing. Yes.
Yeah. And certainly do it right away. If there's something like that you can do right away, do it right away and, set that path.
Yep. Good baby steps. Steps. Yeah. So one, I think, related topic that has come up, particularly because of the European Accessibility Act, but also kind of just generally over the years, is accessibility overlays and this issue of using them. So tools like Accessibility and others like that sort of sit, I think you call it bolt on. You use that terminology, they bolt to your site or sit on top of your site. Those aren't necessarily going to magically put you in compliance with accessibility standards, correct?
Right, right. So those widgets, if you will, or plugins, lots of ways to sort of talk about them. They are an overlay. They're not part of the code of your website. The European Accessibility Act actually explicitly states that they are not sufficient for compliance. Overlays are generally disliked by the web accessibility community. They've often proven to make websites more difficult to manage. In contrast to, of course, their marketing says that they're just this win all, be all. But in fact, real accessibility experts have found that they can sometimes make your website worse. One of the places where I've actually seen that, and it's a little bit heartbreaking, is when you take a website that is not bad, is fairly accessible, is pretty good in the whole range of accessibility, and adding an overlay not only costs the company money, and it can get in the way of other structure. It sits there over your site, and we've seen it block a mobile menu, right? So you can't access the mobile menu because the widget's in the way, right? So imagine taking a site that's really not that bad and putting a widget on, spending money on it, and your website just became worse. I've also seen it.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. I've seen other ways that it can also, rather than improving things, make more challenges and roadblocks for all users, actually.
Right. Yeah, that's
so
unfortunate.
Certainly with the European Accessibility Act explicitly stating widgets are not, and then the real issues that we've seen, it's not something that we can recommend at all right now.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important for companies to understand that, especially if they fall underneath the EAA regulations. So yes. Is there anything else related to accessibility that we haven't touched on already that you want to make sure that marketers kind of keep in mind right now or know going forward?
Yeah, no, there is actually. I think as this topic comes, more and more into people's consciousness, not that it shouldn't have already been there, it can be overwhelming because it feels a little bit like, it's brand new and it's a big deal, and you might feel suddenly blindsided. Here I've had my website for 5 years. I didn't know it wasn't okay. So this new knowledge, right, can be really, really undermining, right? I think what's really important for marketers to know is that web accessibility doesn't have to be that hard, right? So because it's new to many people and there's a learning curve and all that, it feels like a tremendous thing. It doesn't have to be that hard. With education across your teams, if you're sort of thoughtfully infusing these best practices throughout all your processes, then you're ensuring that web accessibility just becomes part of what we do every day, right? It's not an afterthought. It's not something, overwhelming and looming in the distance. It's just part of our jobs. We only found ourselves in these difficult situations, and from a time perspective or a budgetary perspective, these are only issues when it's something that's been neglected and deprioritized over time.
Yeah, that's a very good message and reminder that if you can just incorporate it into the way that you're doing things on a regular basis, which speaks to the importance of training. It's not just, even if you go out and hire a company like Northwoods to help you identify the accessibility issues and help remediate some of the larger ones. I know you always talk about how important it is to train your team then on maintaining the site, because it can immediately become inaccessible or out of compliance once the site is handed over from an expert like you, and the team at the company starts to manage it and doesn't put descriptive link text, and it doesn't use all images and things like that. So that's another piece of it too, that it's really important to have that training.
That's right. And the fact is, actually, there's the WebAIM, it's called the Web Accessibility in Mind, is an organization that does this project called the Million Project. And for, I think, 6 years now, they've looked at what are considered the top 1,000,000 web pages and reviewed them for accessibility. And unfortunately, this is why I led today with this idea that most sites are inaccessible. It's because of this project. And it shows, again, something like 98% of sites come back, or the home pages is what they're checking, come back inaccessible, often with 50 or more errors on that page, per page, right? It just seems like so much, right? But when you look at charts of what those errors are, so much of it is coming not even in the code, but in the content. And by that, I mean things that the typical content creator, webmaster, what do you want to call the person who's actually getting that words and images onto the page, that level of interface, not deep in the code, but right there. And like you mentioned, adding alt text, using descriptive link text, using understandable, clear, concise language. When we set up a site, how is the navigation set up so that it makes sense? Is color contrast appropriate, so the color palette that you're choosing, and all of those things are not super technical, right? They're at sort of the layman entering content kind of level.
Yeah, that's such an important thing, because those are things, going back to your comment about working that into your process, your everyday consideration. Those are things that are completely within a web team's control, that they can do on a regular basis. So yeah, very good advice. Well, thank you so much, Sydney, for joining me and talking about this really important topic, and becoming even more important with the European Accessibility Act kind of looming in terms of the penalty phase. So I really appreciate all your great advice and insights. And for those of you in the audience, make sure to come to our website at nwsdigital.com and check out Sydney's blog posts. And she has recordings of webinars that she's done on accessibility, and it's just great advice, and delivered in a very easy to understand way. So take advantage of all of those resources that she's created. And thank you to everyone for tuning in, and keep an eye out for our next Around the Campfire episode, which will be coming in the next couple of weeks. And you can find all of our previous episodes on our YouTube channel and on our website, again, at nwsdigital.com/around the campfire. So thank you, Sydney. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you all around the campfire again really soon. So take care.
Thank you.